Welcome to the Threat Show. My name is Darien Kindlund, VP of Technology here at Fletch, and joining us today is Chris Wilder, Director of Research over at Tag Cyber. Robert, our normal MC for this week, is out on vacation, so I'll be wearing multiple hats today. Let's get through the rundown of what the threats are for the week ending December 2nd, 2022. This week, we actually have a number of different types of threats seen over the past 7 days. We've got a couple of different ransomware groups, a brand new zero-day coming out of Chrome, as well as a number of new threat activity based in China, as well as some specific types of threats targeting shoppers over the holidays, honestly. Pretty crazy stuff, Chris.
Yeah, shocking. Shocking they're targeting people at holidays. So
yeah, it's kind of expected, right? So going through the list, we've got Maple Leaf Foods, which is a Canadian meat processor hit with ransomware based on a name called Black Basta. Now, from previous OSINT research, this has been tied or affiliated with Fin7. They haven't specifically gone into details around the methodologies of attacks, but given the fact that this particular group is very prolific, chances are the same tactics and methodologies were employed to compromise this organization.
One thing that struck me about this is what not to do when you get hit. Right. This is everything you should never, ever do. And I think that probably a large part of this is Maple Leaf is probably trying to overly disclose. But this is something, we're seeing. I mean, we've seen a lot of meat processing plants all around the world. A lot of sabotage and a lot of breaches and attacks. And most of them you don't hear about. They're just quietly pushed off to the left and pay the ransomware. But it's something that, as somebody who advises many, many large companies, I would never, ever go out and publicly tell them to pound sand. It's just not a good practice.
Right. It kind of sets you up as a target for other ransomware groups, honestly.
Exactly.
Crazy. And wouldn't you know it, by end of November, we have a brand new 8th zero-day related to Google Chrome. I think everyone is kind of taking bets as to whether or not we'll get up to 9 or 10 zero days by the end of the year. But yeah, this is another first for this particular year compared to previous years.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Apple and Google are kind of in a competition to, I guess it's a race to the bottom. But I just told my team that if they're using Chrome to update everything, and that's pretty much all you can really do. Yeah, Chrome does do a pretty good job of auto updates, but if it hasn't done it, make sure that you do it. The other side of that too is we've talked about this twice, is some of the other secure browser companies that are out there. A lot of times they say this doesn't affect them because even though they're built on Chromium, they already have the security controls built in. But it doesn't give a very good sign for confidence in the Chromium browsers.
It's a double-edged sword, right? It's good that Google has a mechanism to push out updates very quickly. The biggest problem, I think, is just the usability disruption because keep in mind, even though the update's pushed down to the browser, it doesn't get applied until you actually reload Chrome. So it's an inconvenience, right? A lot of people are like, well, I don't want to necessarily close out the browser because I'll lose all my tabs. So it's one of those things where you just have to educate people. Hey, look, this is part of life. You're going to have to reload the browser probably daily. That would be my expectation, 5-10 years from now, just dealing with security updates, unfortunately.
Yeah, kind of as a best practice is, I tend to try to reboot my entire system a couple times a week just to clear out all the FUD.
Exactly. So moving on, we've got a particular type of tactic that is starting to ramp up over the holidays, similar to past holidays, honestly, where we've got cybercriminals that are typo squatting, common Black Friday sales, Cyber Monday sale websites, and are trying to entice unexpected shoppers effectively. This is not something that's new for this particular season. But what I found interesting about this particular tactic is that a lot of security companies will alert when users visit domains that were recently created in the past, let's say 3, 5, 7 days, right? Which is what a lot of these cyber criminals have done, where they've stood up infrastructure maybe a week or two before the actual date of their campaign or operation. But now we're seeing evidence of cyber criminals, creating these typo squatted domains years in advance, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 years in advance. It's mainly a mechanism to avoid, the domain age as being a factor in defending against this sort of attack. It's going to be getting harder for defenders to be able to deal with this problem, not only, at the consumer level, but also at the corporate level.
And sadly, C2 DNS protection doesn't really track this or even detect it. The one thing I would add to this is, just as a general rule for consumers, it's very convenient to put your credit card, save your credit card in your browser, save your name, you address all that, save all your secrets in a wallet. In general, that's not a good practice. And, a lot of times it's these types of attacks, or people will get, unwittingly get tricked. And if you have all of that information in your browser just out of convenience, you're going to expose yourself, and it won't be a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. Using payment systems that provide like one-time use credit card numbers is highly recommended, just because of the rampant fraud and abuse that happens around this time frame.
Or get a small gift card, fill it up with, $10-15.
There you go. So moving on, Mandiant actually identified a brand new threat group out of China called UNC 4191. They haven't necessarily assigned an APT designation to this because they're still gathering intelligence around it. But what's interesting about this particular group is that they're going after air-gapped networks, specifically in the South Asia, Philippines region. So the primary infection vector was actually infected USB sticks. And you wonder, who uses USB sticks in 2022? And apparently there's still a valid use for this stuff in environments where the computer systems aren't directly connected to the internet. And so they found brand new custom malware, at least I think 3 different strains of malware tied to this particular group. It's likely their activity is going to grow further.
The advice that we're giving our customers right now, the smaller ones can't really afford this, but in general, I think that guys like Fletch and are from an intelligence perspective, a threat intelligence perspective, I think it's so important at least to be up to speed on what's happening, just know what's happening in the world and what's going on around you. But more importantly, I think if companies can invest in threat hunting solutions like Mandiant, that will help SOC teams and security teams to eliminate a lot of these types of threats. And also, I mean, just in general, don't allow your employees to use fobs. It's just, you're just asking for trouble.
Exactly. So there's a bunch of other ways that they can prevent this category of attack. It's just a matter of what policies exist for each organization. Okay, and then lastly, we've got another ransomware strain that's targeting Chilean users right now over fake COVID-19 information, specifically for websites that are hosting what appeared to be legitimate COVID-19 recommendations, but it's actually not. And it'll be interesting to see if this sort of activity spreads further outside of South America to other regions.
Yeah, this would be an interesting one to watch. I think it kind of goes back to what's happening with bad bots and things like that. A lot of these bots will start in one concentrated area, or the ransomware will start in a concentrated area. They'll figure out what the different vulnerabilities are, what the different ways to get around things, and then they just blow it up. So this one's definitely you want to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. And we'll see how this particular ransomware group evolves further. It's relatively new, which is why we kind of flagged it for this discussion point.
Yeah. And most users in South America tend to only use their phones as their connection to the internet. It's a very mobile heavy environment. This is something that's probably, there's some different eyes on the prize, going through phone systems. People just click links. They just don't think through it.
It's very easy to become complacent during the holidays, and that's clearly happening now, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. This has been a pleasure, and hopefully the rest of the holidays will be less intense. I don't know. What are your thoughts as to how the rest of it's going to go for the new year? Any New Year predictions from your side?
Oh, we got through Black Cyber Friday or Cyber Monday. So every day is cyber in my world. But I think that 2023 we're going to see a massive uptick in nation state attacks against targets that are unusual things. Southwest Asia, I think there's going to be an increase there. I think there's going to be a lot more hacktivism attacks popping up that are largely coming out of North Korea and Iran, because it's very profitable if nation states are sponsoring those. But I think 2023 is going to be a pivotal year in the cybersecurity world.
Wholeheartedly agree. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll be here and see how the rest of the world plays out once the new year transitions.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. And
my pleasure.
Always we'll be here next week to wrap up the rest of the threats we see next.
Excellent.
So join us next week on the Threat Show. Our guest speaker then will be Nathan Case, head of security over at Datadog, focused on healthcare and genomics-based threats.
Thank you for tuning into the Threat Show. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to us on YouTube, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and interact with us on Twitter at The Threat Show. Also, be sure to subscribe to Fletch's interactive newsletter and Trending Threats app to go deeper into the stories we discuss and the threat index. Be sure to stay tuned to stay ahead of threats.